Which is what if Naruto became the Alpha Jinchūriki and claimed Hinata and Hanabi as his fox-bound queens. Part 5. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Kin took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. Her sensei had told her to go to her hotel room and that a superior would meet her there. She knew who would be waiting for her. Trying to appear as calm as she could, she opened the door and stepped inside, quickly closing the door and making her way to the seat already placed in front of the snake summoner. Did you enjoy the show I put up, sensei? She asked before Orochimaru could talk and noticed that one of his eyebrows rose slightly. Oh, so you knew it was me. Yes, Orochimaru-sama, the hairdo and lack of marks around your eyes may have fooled the Konoha ninja, but not me. You looked too similar and you had that small smell of antiseptic. Orochimaru nodded, impressed. Good. Do you think someone else recognized me? I am positive the Hokage did, even though he didn't show it. The Suna Jonin didn't, he was too focused on his team, especially the red-head psycho. Amongst the Konoha Jonin, I'd say the red-head and the gray-haired guy. Other than that, I don't think anyone noticed. Orochimaru nodded again. This one was far smarter than she showed before. She was indeed full of surprises. Now, would you tell me why your Kodo-related abilities weren't documented? I wanted to surprise you. Surprise me? Asked Orochimaru with a raised eyebrow. Why? This discussion was becoming amusing and enjoyable. I know what I am. A pawn. And I know what you are. Curious. You were less likely to sacrifice a pawn that caught your interest. Your curiosity will push you to try and see how far I can go. I'm betting on this for my survival. She answered plainly. Lying there would be a stupid idea. Orochimaru looked honestly surprised and thoroughly entertained by her bluntness. Oh, you did all that to surprise me. And what if I decide to sacrifice you now that my curiosity is sated? He asked with a smirk. He was curious to see what her answer would be. Not every gambit is successful. I'll just have to find something else in the next month. And besides, I don't believe your curiosity is sated just yet. Answered Kin calmly, while inside she was almost crying from the pressure. Orochimaru chuckled, pleased with her answer. You were right, my curiosity isn't sated. He caught a flash of relief in the girl's eyes. I do wonder how good your mind is. What do you think of the mission I assigned you and your team? Kin took a moment to compose herself. She had already thought about it. It was a cover. It is quite known that you yearn to learn every jutsu in the world, something that the Sharingan would help you do, but you only told us to assassinate Uchiha Sasuke. It makes no sense. The only reason I see would be that you wanted to test him, and knowing about the mark some of Oto's elite bear, I would suppose that you planned to give him such a mark and have us test his power to see if he was worthy of it. Orochimaru was honestly very surprised. He didn't expect this level of insight from the girl. Or that much knowledge. How do you know about the mark? He asked, considering whether he should kill her or not out of caution. Your elites aren't that discreet when they think no one can hear them, and they tend to forget this lowly genin easily. Answered Kin calmly. She had gotten so far with honesty and was still alive, why not try and go further? Orochimaru nodded in understanding before studying the young girl some more. She was somewhat frail, nowhere near strong enough to survive a cursed seal, so that was out of the question, but she showed potential, tremendous potential. She would have her uses. Kushina-san, when will you stop using this childish nickname? Asked Sake dryly. She did not enjoy this nickname the redhead gave her. When squids fly high in the clouds. Now, how about we talk about my students' lands, What is there to talk about? She relinquished them to the guild in exchange for a reasonable monthly allowance. The temperature in the room suddenly dropped dramatically, and every security guard present collapsed to their knees, trying and failing to breathe. Sake had been near Shinobi before, so she was able to remain seated, but she was shaking in fright. Sweat was forming on her brow, and her wide eyes could only take in the dead serious face of one Uzumaki Kushina. This was bad. Kushina was never serious. Are you shitting me? Ground out the S-rank kunoichi. I did some research before coming here, and you make no less than 30 times the money you give her off of her lands. You will give Kurenai her lands back. I will do no such things. Sake ground out. There are families that live thanks to those profits. You think I give a? Answered Kushina, releasing her killing intent before one of the guards killed themselves. I'm a kunoichi, not a nun. I don't care about your employees. What I care about is that you are screwing over one of my close friends, and there's no way in hell I'm going to let that slide. Last chance Sake, relinquish her lands. For a moment, Sake considered letting go of the lands. It would certainly save troubles, but then her hatred of Kushina came back. Go yourself, you red-haired. She snarled. She expected Kushina to lash out like she did when they were kids, not the eerie calm that followed, or the arctic look in her eyes. For a moment, she wondered what Kushina had planned, then she remembered just who her son was, and swore in her head. Then it shall be war, said Kushina quietly before leaving the office, a bewildered Kurenai following after her. Oh, said Kushina, stopping for a moment. If you even try to attack Kur-chan, I'll know, and you'll live hell. Got it. Without waiting for an answer, she left. Shino was quite happy. He had asked the Taki Jonin if he had any particular plans for Fu's training, and upon receiving a negative answer had asked if it would be possible to invite her to train with him. While he hated the foolish Jonin for his irrational hatred of his Heim, he was grateful for the occasion to spend more time with her. Fu's reaction was quite pleasing too. She had smiled widely and quickly hooked her arm around his. As soon as they left the forest, he had led them to the Aburame compound. He was confident his father would accept. He had been quite supportive of the budding relationship. As they reached the Aburame district, Fu tensed a bit, but didn't react otherwise, and that tenseness immediately left her when they passed the gates. Maybe because there were plenty of colorful little critters all around. Fireflies and butterflies were flying around the compound, a few of them landing on her. Beetles of various kinds were crawling along the buildings, but instead of giving the impression of a decaying, vermin-filled place, it looked like a very lively place, maybe because of the numerous plants and flowers everywhere around the compound. Fu loved it. She felt at home. They made their way to the clan head's home, answering the greetings they got along the way, and enduring the teasing that came with it. Fu was particularly happy. 1. The Aburame were surprisingly warm and welcoming. 2. Shino never once denied when asked if she was his girlfriend. When they reached Shino's home, they found themselves intercepted by Shino's mother. Oh my, what do we have here? Asked the older Aburame, a mischievous smile on her face. Is my son already bringing a girl home? Oh, you grew up so fast. Oh, he's just taking responsibility, you know, answered Fu nonchalantly, the heads of both Aburame snapping to her. In the few moments of silence that followed, Fu had to struggle to contain her laughter. Damn it, I knew we should have given him the talk earlier, swore Shino's mother. That was the last straw, and Fu burst into laughter. Ha ha ha, oh man, those faces. Ha 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 ha, you gasped. You should have seen your faces. Fu was laughing so hard that she had to lean on Shino to remain standing. Mother and son looked at each other, and understood they had been played. And the mother was far from displeased. Oh, a little trickster, are you? I already like you. Are you staying for dinner? She asked, a warm undertone in her voice, making Fu feel even more at home. Would you like to? She turned to Shino, and answered his question with a happy nod. Then yes, mother. Good. If you want to talk to your father, he is in his office. Shino nodded, and began to lead Fu toward his father's office. Kabuto looked at the stone wall dispassionately. He honestly didn't care. No matter what the leaf interrogators could try, he wouldn't talk. The two idiots he had been paired with would, but not him, and it was all that mattered, because he was the one that held the relevant information. And he would not say a thing. His smug demeanor changed when Yamanaka Inoichi stepped inside the room. He had hoped to get some physical torture first. He needed that to activate the technique that clouded his memories to anyone but himself, an old memory from root. But now, that was out of the window. Inoichi sat in front of him, calm as can be. You're pretty much screwed, you know, he said calmly. Why don't you spare us both the effort and simply tell me what I want to know? Kabuto began considering his options. Yes, he had some level of loyalty to Orochimaru, and was forced to obey to Sasori due to his seal, but he seriously didn't want to become a vegetable. And he knew perfectly well what happened when you got a Yamanaka mind rape and resisted. The only one leaving happy was the Yamanaka, the victim left drooling. He knew he could resist most Yamanaka and escape relatively unscathed, but Inoichi. That guy had turned the Tsuchikage's youngest son into a simpleton to extract a battle plan from his mind. Poor sucker was at the mental level of a 6-year-old, and that was with more than 2 decades of re-education. But at the same time, betraying the Snake Lord of Odo would spell his doom for certain. He was in a tight spot, and he knew it. Maybe he could earn himself some time. I realized that talking would be in my best interest, however I believe to be unable to do it. You know, those pesky little pieces of ink can do a lot of things. Inoichi nodded, apparently satisfied with the answer, probably because it avoided him a lot of trouble. The information retention seal could keep him at bay for a while, maybe even harm him, and Kabuto didn't want that. Not because he was generous, only because then the whole Yamanaka clan would take a sick pleasure in making him live all of the most painful moments of his life, again and again, and when the Yamanaka wouldn't be going to town with his psyche, then Inoichi's colleagues would probably be showing just how affectionate their countless pointy tools could be. Not really a situation Kabuto wanted to be in. Oh no, for now, he had time and maybe a chance at freedom. He'd have to make do with what he got. Tenten knocked on Naruto's door, hoping he would accept her request. She had high hopes, but couldn't be too sure. After a few seconds, the door opened, revealing a slightly disheveled and blushing Naruto. A thing in particular caught Tenten's eye. His coat was down, and there were twin red marks on each side of his neck. Ah, Tenten, what can I do for you? Naruto, are those hickeys? She asked with an amused smile. Naruto had the decency to blush, but did not deny. Anyway, do you need me for anything? He asked, only realizing afterward the innuendo. Oh, Naruto, I wouldn't. That's for Hanabi and Hinata only. Damn straight. Hanabi head appeared next to Naruto's and her arm wrapped around him from the back. Yo needs something? Asked Hanabi. Actually, yes, I honestly don't want to see Guy right now, and I need someplace to train. I was wondering if you'd give me asylum for the month Naruto. Sure, no problem, answered the blonde easily. Tomorrow, East Gate, at 9:30. Sure, I'll be there. Oh, and Hanabi, try to leave some for Hinata. The more outgoing of the twins rolled her eyes. As if, she's the one that got him playing with her for the last half hour. Tenten's eyebrows shot up. What, it's always the quiet ones. Sarutobi pondered his situation calmly, trying to determine his alternatives. Exposing Orochimaru could have serious consequences. He was already inside the village, disguised as the sound team leader. Canceling the exams was bound to enrage him, probably enough to send him on a rampage. The village could not face an S-rank criminal on a rampage, especially one with no morals like Orochimaru. The Anbu would need to up their training, Jiraiya would have to be recalled, maybe see if Tsunade could be brought back. Guy and Kakashi weren't S-rank, but they weren't that far. Nowhere near Orochimaru's level, but not bad either. Whatever his wayward student had claimed, they'd need firepower. Warning the Jonin would be a good idea. Maybe the high-ranking Chunin too. The lower ranks were too likely to panic or house spies. It would prove complicated. Thankfully, with Kushina back, they had one more S-rank shinobi in their ranks, and the news would travel fast. The stories around the Red Fury were numerous, and many involved a crazed woman covered in blood laughing in the middle of a corpse-covered battlefield. Of course, these stories were exaggerations but, well, let's just say the sliver of truth to them wasn't as small as it was for other such stories. Kushina really took the news of her home's destruction badly. She had single-handedly ended a minor shinobi village after all, a largely weakened one admittedly, but still. She was a force to be reckoned, one that few would trifle with. He'd need more information on the clans Naruto had recruited, they were mostly unknowns. The samurai, he simply had no information on them other than the fact they were seen as recluses by the Land of Iron, which meant their level of isolation had been close to her method. The Reizatsu had participated in the fabrication of the Nadime's sword and were proficient lightning users, but he didn't really know more than that. He didn't exactly have much contact with them, and he couldn't tell at which level they sat, or how high their numbers currently were. The Okami had been a quiet independent clan from Northwest Earth Country, so they hadn't been in contact with them, but he had heard that banditry in this part of Earth Country was the trend if you wanted a swift death. All in all, he had no idea of exactly how powerful Whirlpool was. But inviting the strongest of Whirlpool's forces to watch their lord's match seemed like a good idea. However, to make it discreet, he needed to extend the invitation to the strongest members of the militias of each clan represented in the exams. That meant the Aburame, Hyuga, Uchiha, Nara and Kurama. The Uchiha militia was somewhat poor in talent, since every worthwhile families were made to marry into the Uchiha clan. The Aburame had a decently trained force of shinobi, with no less than 3 vassal clans that fought using different types of insects. The Hyuga had a well-trained force of foot soldiers, 5 vassal families dedicated to training elite Yojimbo and 3 monasteries of a Sohei order on their lands. The Nara trained their troops well, and Chunin-level shinobi were common amongst their forces, and to add to this they had at their disposal a family of Jonin-level shinobi. The Kurama for their part had trained a sizable part of their militia in archery and ambush tactics. Whatever his former student had prepared, the small reinforcements would be useful. Orochimaru had sworn to destroy Konoha, and even though it was possible that he wasn't acting now to fulfill this goal, it remained a very real possibility. Thus, he'd need to reduce the amount of missions taken for the period of the exams. They'd use the excuse of a reorganization, and send large numbers of ninja on fake missions shortly before the exams to give the impression they were vulnerable. That seemed like a good plan, but he'd need to discuss it. He pressed the button on the interphone. Sanzo, call Homura, Kaharu and Danzo please. The leaf would remain standing. Kushina grunted in pain. She had suffered hell through the last few days, and for a good reason. Her body was not used to Kyuubi's chakra anymore, and she just so happened to be charged full of it. The process of rebuilding her muscles from scratch and jumpstarting her body hadn't gone smoothly, and the first 2 days had been especially hard. She had figured she'd need to eat a lot to replace the lost matter and create fresh cells in place of the artificial ones created by the fox's chakra, and even if the pain had considerably lessened, it was still a very real hindrance. She had to hide this weakness, otherwise Orochimaru would seize the occasion to end her. She was safe here, in her old house, safe from her enemies but not from the memories. Naruto was the only reason she hadn't collapsed emotionally already. She couldn't grieve properly yet, she'd have to wait until she was in Whirlpool for that, she'd be safe there. Whirlpool. She hadn't stepped foot on the island since the mission to recover what they could from Uzushio's ruins. What did it look like now? How would the people see her, knowing she abandoned them? She sighed. Her future looked messed up. Inoichi looked at the 3 children in front of him, a worried expression on his face. He signaled for them to follow him, and led them to the familial garden. Hopefully, the relaxed and welcoming atmosphere would help them open up and tell him what had happened. He had an idea, but he hoped against all hope that he was wrong. Inoichi sighed quietly to himself. He hated the fact that his family had to be dragged into this mess. The Gauntlet's students were stronger than the others, what of it? If they were so strong, why not simply send a few Yamanaka to go through the training and report? But no, that would be showing weakness. Inoichi really hated politics. He led his daughter's team to the heart of the flower garden, designed entirely to relax and put at ease using knowledge of the way the human mind worked. Inoichi sat cross-legged in the middle of the garden and signaled for the youngsters to follow his example. Without a word, they sat in an arc in front of him. Now, would you like to talk about what happened? Gently prodded Inoichi. Shikamaru nodded, and tears began to flow down his cheeks. If you asked his colleagues, Aburame Shibi was often described as discreet, stoic, efficient and calm. He considered himself a pragmatic and determined ninja, but if you asked him his most defining quality, he would answer you that it was luck. Indeed, throughout his career, Shibi had enjoyed an almost inexhaustible amount of luck. His genin team's missions had always gone perfectly fine, moral dilemmas were as rare as an energetic Nara and they had reached their promotion on the first try. After making Shunin, he had been given leadership roles and had found himself in a distressingly high number of situations where he could make relations, finding and wooing his beloved Hosako on one such occasion, had been able to defeat all of his opponents with relatively few injuries and filled his file with successes. Then had come the war, and his luck had stayed at his side, allowing him to perform admirably while remaining mostly uninjured, thus bringing much honor to the clan. After the war, he had found himself in charge of the clan, and as any clan head, had found himself in need of a wife. That was when Hosako-chan had decided to make herself known again, easily convincing her family to offer her hand in marriage to him, and since she came from a powerful noble clan, the marriage had quickly been approved. Then, after upping the training of clan members on some points, Shibi had been able to enjoy a peaceful life as clan head, with a surprisingly low number of deaths among his clansmen. And it appeared his luck was hereditary. It was rare for an Aburame to feel attracted to a woman, and the sooner this attraction appeared, the deeper the connection tended to be. His son had developed one such bond with the container of the Shichibi. Shibi was quite pleased indeed, offering a union between her and his son would greatly benefit Konoha and the Aburame, bringing an ally to the village, and honor to the clan. As a side effect, Taki would be forced to treat the young girl better. It wouldn't do to mistreat their foremost link with the leaf. And if, by any ridiculous turn of fate Taki decided to antagonize Konoha, the affection-craving girl would join the Aburame in a heartbeat. And they would welcome her with open arms. Even revealing her status as a container would do nothing to deter Shino, he already knew and did not care for it. Fu would also bring much to the clan. Those members that could not handle the Kikaichu would greatly benefit from her Kaiden techniques. Shibi smiled contentedly, stroking his wife's back as they lay together in bed, her head on his chest. Something the matter, Shibi-kun? She asked from her position. Quite the opposite, my love, he said calmly. It just seems our son inherited my luck, and that once again, personal feelings and clan interests are perfectly aligned. Hosako smiled in satisfaction. Yes, I really like her, you know. She's just so much fun. Then, I guess the compound will be quite lively when she brings Shino's child to the world, said Shibi with a smile. Speaking of which, said Hosako as she rose to meet her husband's gaze. I'd like another. Yes, Shibi was indeed lucky to be able to enjoy so much working for his clan's best interest. Yakumo walked through the Kurama compound, waving at her relatives and greeting them back. She was the hope of the clan, the first to have mastered the bloodline, a living beacon of hope for her people. That was what her father often told her, that was the reason she had to set an example and show the world that the Kurama clan was far from the dying family some made them out to be. For centuries the Kurama bloodline had plagued the clan, turning proud family members into whirlwinds of madness and destruction. During the Clan Wars era, while a sad loss for the clan, such occurrences were dealt with constructively by releasing the crazed fighters upon the enemy, inflicting terrifying damage before the bulk of the clan's forces swept in and crushed any opposition. However, after they joined Konoha, such a tactic was excluded. The fact that their bloodline had grown more and more chaotic had also been a cause for concern, and had prompted the various clan heads to search for ways to reduce both the power and the rhythm of appearance of the bloodline, with quite some success. Then, Yakumo had been born, and her bloodline had been revealed to be the strongest the clan had seen in several centuries. Her grandfather had panicked, ordering her death as soon as he knew, prompting her father to defy him for leadership. Since that day, the clan had been under the control of Kurama Murakumo, and her father had strived to find a way to control the bloodline by making contact with the Yamanaka clan on the matter. Inoichi had followed Yakumo throughout her childhood, identifying the cause of the madness threatening her as a second personality. The Kurama bloodline needed a high level of spiritual energy to be functional, additional energy that was provided by a second personality. Said personality built itself by taking the pieces of emotions that the main personality suppressed, beginning early on by assimilating the slight feelings of resentment and anger a child felt when its parents reacted negatively to their temper tantrum, until a point where the second personality was strong enough to take over and wreak havoc. Inoichi had put Yakumo in contact with her second personality early on, introducing her as her mind twin and causing Yakumo to quickly befriend the budding personality, unconsciously sharing her feelings with it. Thus, Ito-chan had been born, and the clan was given hope. From there, many Kurama had sought the help of the Yamanaka to partially awaken their bloodline, making the clan stronger. After her, several children of the clan had been born showing signs of the clan's bloodline, and the new generation was a cause of great hope for many in the clan. Because of her instrumental role in discovering the secrets of their bloodline, many Kurama saw Yakumo as a hero of sorts, regardless of the fact that her sole merit in the matter had been to be born. That was just another motivation to become strong. She had to be worthy of her clan's respect. Yaku-ne. Yakumo was pulled out of her thoughts by the voice of her baby cousin, little Mito-chan. She was a sweet little girl with short brown hair held in two small pigtails near her neck, a smile that could brighten your days in a flash, and the innate ability to make anyone melt with her big, innocent green eyes. Yakumo went on a small run and picked the girl up before swirling her around, causing the 4-year-old to laugh delightedly. "Ah, Mito-chan came to greet me, so sweet," gushed Yakumo as she hugged the child to her chest, rubbing her cheek on her head. "I missed Yaku-ne," whined the little girl, pulling off her puppy eyes effortlessly. Yakumo smiled affectionately at the little girl. "Sorry sweetie, but I have to go to work you know." She only smiled fondly when her cousin began to tear up dramatically. Mito, where are you?" came the annoyed voice of the little girl's father. "She's here uncle," called out Yakumo. As soon as Unkai came into view, Mito's tears were forgotten, and she was extending an arm toward her father, the other grasping Yakumo's kimono, a large smile on her face. "Daddy." Unkai jogged until he was next to Yakumo, and carefully picked up his daughter, an expression between amusement and annoyance on his face. "What did I tell you about not running around unattended, young lady?" Mito looked at him with big innocent eyes. "Sorry papa," she said quietly, causing her poor father to completely melt and forgive her, sighing yet again at his weakness. Yakumo could only snicker at this. She loved seeing her strict uncle reduced to a puddle of malleable goo by her sweet little cousin. It was at this moment that Yakumo's parents arrived. Kurama Murakumo and Yoroko looked at their daughter, waiting for her report. Yakumo could see hope in her parents' eyes, her mother showing it more freely than her father. With a smile, she bowed. "Father, Mother, Ito-chan and I would like to request additional training for the month. We wish to have the best chances at promotion during the third phase of the exams," she said, feeling happiness well up in her heart as she saw the pride in her parents' eyes. "We're gonna rock, let's show the world why the Mind Weavers were feared. Yes, let's show the world what we can do." Naruto was sitting calmly near the east gate, waiting for Tenten. Masahiro had arrived yesterday with a group of samurai to escort them back to Whirlpool. The old samurai had been relatively cold to Kushina, never going past the formal greeting and doing his best to not have to acknowledge her. That was to be expected, but it changed nothing to his loyalty. Hiyashi and his family were there too, incognito of course, except for the twins who were simply impossible to disguise. Finally, Tenten came, her pack resting on her shoulders. "Yo, I'm here, so, ready to go." Naruto nodded and picked up his pack, signaling for his escort to prepare to move out. The twins quickly placed themselves on either side of him, each grabbing one of his arms, much to the blonde teen's happiness. Without much more words, the group began walking, checking out at the gate as requested, and leaving for Whirlpool. As requested by standard village procedure, they would simply walk until reaching the external detection barrier, 5 kilometers from the village, and then travel at ninja speed. Along the way, Hiyashi explained that he couldn't teach them Juken itself, but he could help them develop something similar that could have realistically been created with the available information on Juken. Hinata and Hanabi were, of course, perfectly fine with that and had in fact already begun working on that. Hearing this, Hiyashi decided they would then work on new ways to perform some of the Hyuga clan's most famous techniques, much to his daughter's excitement. Naruto looked at his mother. She looked quite uncomfortable. "Mom, you okay? What do you think?" She answered with a sigh. "If everyone in Whirlpool reacts like that to my presence, it's going to be hard." She muttered, only loud enough for Naruto to hear. Her son gave her a sympathetic look. "I'll talk to them if they give you too hard a time." Kushina smiled softly and ruffled her son's hair. "Thanks, son. Ah, well, since we're going to Whirlpool, I think I'll take you to the ruins of Uzushio. Hopefully the village is still recognizable." She muttered sadly. Naruto grasped her hand and squeezed lightly, giving her a sympathetic smile. Kushina idly thought that she had only seen such maturity in so young a child during wartime, and felt regret at being unable to give her only child a normal childhood. Nonetheless, she smiled thankfully at her child and returned her gaze to the road ahead, feeling slightly more at ease. Soon, they passed the 5 kilometers mark, and took to the trees, covering much more ground, much more rapidly. When night fell, they were about halfway to the port where their ship waited for them. The camp was quickly built, and Naruto was honestly surprised at the size of the tents Masahiro had brought for him, his guests and, surprisingly considering his earlier reaction, his mother. The tents were large, very large. They were long hexagons, as large as his living room, maybe a bit larger, and even though the bedding inside was a bit rustic, it was still better than what most shinobi enjoyed in mission. However, there was something that bothered him. "Masahiro, why do we have ridiculously large tents while you and the rest of the escort only have small tents? You are our lord, and as such deserve the comfort," answered Masahiro like it was the most natural thing. Naruto considered the situation for a moment, then took a decision. "Mom, do you think you could move your things to my tent? That way we can leave the last big one for them." "Sure son, no problem," answered Kushina easily, already getting her stuff. Masahiro looked at this, quite baffled. But my lord, no buts. Move your bedding in there," said Naruto calmly. He could see some of his samurai smiling quite happily at the idea of slipping in a large tent. Understandable, there were seals to generate heat on the inside. Naruto nodded to himself, satisfied. Sasuke and Sakura looked at their teacher, wondering why the purple-haired proctor was there. "Alright, I don't need to tell you that Naruto will be training with his mother. In fact he left just this morning, so we have to determine who you two will train with. That is where I and Anko here step in. Sakura, you will train with Anko. She can teach you a lot about anatomy, something that will be useful in your med-nin studies and a few other fields." Sakura smiled meanly. "I always dreamed of punching pressure points to make my enemies wither in pain." Anko smiled widely. "I like that girl. It's gonna be Foon." Sasuke looked at this and wondered what was worse, fangirl Sakura or slightly psycho Sakura. Then, he looked at Kakashi. "Sasuke, you'll train with me. Any question?" Sasuke shook his head, and Kakashi nodded, signaling him to come with him. It was the second day of travel and they were making good time, but there was a slight obstacle in their way. A large group of people, obviously shinobi. There were also a surprisingly large number of felines. Naruto tensed. They'd have trouble fighting their way through a whole clan that had descended into banditry. Then, he spotted children in the group, playing with kittens and other young cats. No sane clan would risk their young in such an act, so they were probably safe. 2 men spotted them, and the younger of the 2 began to give orders. Immediately, the fighting force of the clan began to organize themselves, forming ranks and standing at attention, and a clan banner was erected, showing a blue flame with eyes, the right yellow and the left green. Naruto took a moment to detail the coming men. The older of the 2 was dressed in weathered brown pants and a dark green shirt with a straw cloak on, looking overall like a member of the many nomad caravans that traveled the nations. His face was normal, the only thing remarkable was his fair skin despite his obviously harsh lifestyle. Other than that, he had black hair, a graying beard and green eyes. Despite looking like a civilian, he carried himself like a ninja, and a veteran at that, and made no effort to hide the fact. The younger man was a tall man with long white hair that fell to the middle of his back, tan skin, blue slitted eyes and a white goatee. He wore an off-white kimono, light blue hakama and a white haori. Next to him a white lion was walking, its eyes the same color as those of its master, and its tail split down the middle and showing no sign of it being an injury. The 2 men stopped a few paces from the escort and bowed politely. The youngest then cleared his throat. "Greetings. It has come to our attention that Uzumaki Naruto-sama was traveling among you, is that correct?" he asked in a deep and respectful voice. Naruto took a few steps forward, and bowed slightly. That would be me. Neither of the men seemed fazed. They exchanged a glance, and the white-haired one nodded politely at his elder, who smirked and turned to Naruto. Yubokuman Senku, head of the Yubokuman clan. We were part of Whirlpool before the fall. We'd have returned earlier, but the previous head and I had a disagreement. He said calmly. And I am Bakeneko Kamikiba, head of the Bakeneko clan, and this is my partner Kamatsume. We were only recently contacted by the Yubokuman and informed of the rebirth of Whirlpool. Like them, we were part of Uzushio before it fell, and we found ourselves forced to flee overseas to escape our enemies. We both hope that we can reach agreements similar to those that used to bind our ancestors. Naruto took a moment to think and looked at Masahiro. The old samurai nodded. My lord, I remember their clans quite well. The Yubokuman were Whirlpool's eyes and ears, and it's thanks to their reports that we could evacuate the civilians. They can't stay put for long, but they're reliable. The Bakeneko were amongst the fiercest fighters of Whirlpool. I fought next to a few of them during the invasion, and there aren't that many out there that fight like them. We kinda hoped some of them had survived, so we had their old compounds rebuilt. Naruto nodded his head, satisfied with the answer, before turning to the two clan heads. Well then, I guess you only need to settle back in. He said with a smile and a shrug. I'm not going to ask much more of you than my ancestors did. Both clan heads nodded in satisfaction. As the group resumed their walk, they explained to Naruto what their tasks were in Old Whirlpool, where their estates were in the current state of their clans. At dusk, they arrived at the port town where the fleet awaited them, and it was decided that they would leave for Whirlpool the next morning. Danzo looked at the students with a satisfied smile. He was not one for displays of emotions, but he couldn't help but feel immensely satisfied. The clans would see the might of the gauntlet, and they would be forced to send their most talented members to learn in the arena. Already, the Akamichi, Yamanaka and Inuzuka had been eliminated. The Nara boy and the Kurama girl were most likely to pass due to, respectively, abnormally high intelligence, even among the Nara, and total control over a terrifying power allowing to bend the battlefield to her liking. The Aburame was also a serious contender, but he hadn't seen enough to be sure of the boy's level. However, the Nara clan was smart enough to understand how beneficial training in the gauntlet could prove, especially after they saw firsthand the might of his students in the exams. The Akamichi and Yamanaka would follow their allies, upholding the tradition of trust between their clans. The Aburame, like the Nara, were intelligent enough to understand how dangerous their member could prove once trained in the gauntlet. The Inuzuka would join once it was established that the children of the gauntlet were trained to be loyal to Konoha and not Danzo. The only ones they'd really have to convince were the Kurama, and it could prove tricky. When a discussion wasn't going the way they wanted, the Kurama were not above using genjutsu to stir it in the way they liked, and while it wouldn't work on someone as experimented as Danzo, then the Kurama stubbornness would show. The only way they could be swayed would be with a great display of power. One that would be given in the coming exams. Shibi stood near the east gate with his wife, both of them completely relaxed. They were waiting for Fu and Shino to arrive with the green-haired girl's stuff. To say the girl was enthused at the idea of being far from the Taki group for a month would be quite the understatement. She was almost bouncing off the walls this morning. Hasako had once again expressed her liking of the girl, complimenting Shino on his taste in women, causing both teens to blush. Shibi chuckled quietly when he remembered the shade of red his son's face had taken. What is making you laugh, my dear husband? Asked Hasako. The way Shino blushed this morning. You truly are a devil when it comes to embarrassing our son. Well, I had time to train on you, answered the brown-haired woman with a cheeky smile. True. Chuckle so true. Then, the two teens emerged from the crowd going about in Konoha and approached them, discussing animatedly a subject related to insect life. Fu's chitin container and backpack were strapped to her back while Shino had his own backpack. When they arrived near the two adults they put their conversation on hold and looked at them. Very well, said Shibi. For this month of training, we will go northeast, to one of our estates in the countryside. At a reasonable pace, we should reach it tomorrow just before noon. Fu raised her hand. I could summon us a ride if you want. Shibi's eyebrows shot up. You have a summoning contract. Yes, the beetle contract. Then, it would be most appreciated. However, due to village policy, we cannot use summons not registered as loyal to Konoha inside the walls. We will have to walk 5 kilometers before you can summon our ride. Fu nodded, and without further ado, they set off. Kabuto looked at the wall of his cell, trying to pass time. He had gotten the interrogator off his back by saying his ultimate goal was to know himself. He knew that most ninjas simply didn't care about that, so it was bound to have confused him. What he did not expect was for it to confuse him enough to get him off his back for several days. Then, the door opened, drawing Kabuto's attention, but what walked through the threshold was not who he expected. The newcomer sat calmly in the chair in front of him, and smiled kindly. "Good day Kabuto-san, I am Chiriku." Naruto looked at the group below him. After reaching Whirlpool last night, they had stopped in the barracks of the port town for the night. Right now he was in his room, looking out of the window and down at the courtyard of the town fort. Masahiro was ordering some of the samurai there to escort the Bakeneko back to their lands while also overseeing the preparations for the walk of the day. From the look of things, they would leave shortly. Naruto turned away from the window and began to prepare for the day. It didn't take long for the group to be fully prepared and fed, and less than an hour after they woke up, they were hitting the road again. Naruto took this occasion to look upon the town in more details. The town was composed of one-story tall, almost identical wooden buildings built in a traditional style and arranged geometrically. Quarters were separated by canals linked to the sea, small wooden bridges linking each quarter with its neighbors. "Something the matter, my lord?" asked Masahiro. "I'm just wondering why every building is the same and why they are so small." "That's because it's only the ground level," answered Kushina. "The biggest parts are underground. There are rifts all around Whirlpool, so, while the island itself is stable geologically, the surrounding seabed is not, thus causing earthquakes that engender tsunami. The buildings you see are made with mass-produced, interchangeable wooden parts. Under each building lays a pressurized complex designed to house a family. It's more or less like the kind of house you often see in Konoha, but underground, where the tsunami can't reach it. Same with shops and warehouses. Yup, and the fort, you can't seriously place a fort underground, so it was placed on a nearby hill." Naruto nodded, and continued to walk. He noticed that the early risers preparing their shops stopped and looked at them. He even saw one salute, showing he was a former member of the Samurai Corps, and Naruto answered with a nod. After a few minutes of walk, they had stepped out of the small port town, and began to accelerate, heading straight for the middle of the island and the mountains that stood there. After 2 hours of fast running, they arrived at the base of the mountains where another town was nestled, guarding the entrance to one of the few usable paths. "Welcome to Raiwari no Mura, my lord. It's the last stop before we go into the mountains and reach the capital of Whirlpool." Naruto nodded as he observed the walls of the town. The ramparts were 50 feet tall with massive towers at each corner and halfway through the lateral walls. On the walls in front of him, where the tower would be, was the fortified gate. Right now, it was open, allowing them to see the busy town inside. It looked similar to the port town, but buildings were higher and the walls were made of stone. It gave the town a medieval atmosphere that the various lamp posts and electric lines failed to break. At the other side of the town, guarding the other city gate and partially built in the mountain, was the town keep, its 5 roofs towering above the other buildings. Banners displaying the emblem of Whirlpool were hanging from lamp posts in some buildings, next to those of various small merchant clans. As they made their way through the town, the crowd parted to allow them passage, conversations sparking on their way. Many apparently recognized Naruto for who he was, because many bowed to him respectfully, causing the young man to smirk. Around halfway through the town, they saw a group of men standing in front of a large building, wearing black kimono with lotus flower symbol on each shoulder and light gray hakama pants, each having a sword at their side. "Those are the White Lotus Yakuza, my lord. Their leader is Tamahawa Shosu. He controls the underground world in Whirlpool." Naruto nodded in understanding. As they passed near the group, Naruto locked gaze with the criminal leader, and gave a polite nod, earning a smirk from the older man as he and his men bowed respectfully. "I'll have to talk to him," muttered Naruto as they passed the group. Before long, they had exited the town and were climbing the windy mountain pass leading to the central fortress of the island. The road had been carved out of stone in a somewhat flat slope, allowing for easy travel, but making the road longer, and allowing to build fortifications that watched over the road and were only accessible from the keep on the other side of the pass. As they walked through the various gates blocking the way, Naruto noted that the old fortifications showed signs of damage, large patches of soot and small impacts. He also noted that, in some places, the stones and mortar looked far newer than those around, indicating that those patches had taken the most damage during the invasion of Whirlpool, more than 3 decades ago. Finally, after an hour of walking, they reached the last gate, and Masahiro looked positively smug. "My lord, Lady Kushina, allow me to welcome you." The last set of gates, massive wooden slabs reinforced with metal, parted noiselessly. Toshiro Uzumaki, Naruto's eyes widened in awe at the sight. Before him laid one of the greatest creations of mankind in all its resplendent glory. The valley where Shiro Uzumaki stood was large, easily 10 times the size of Konoha, and was dotted with hamlets and numberless fields where various crops grew and cattle lived. On the sides of the valley were more villages, clinging to the mountainside like leeches, draining its precious minerals, the smoke of their furnaces rising in the sky. From each of the cardinal directions, gigantic bridges, easily 35 feet large, crossed the valley, titanic ramps allowing people from inside the valley to climb onto the bridge and reach the city. Naruto could see farmers leading carts full of good to be sold at the capital, samurai standing guard at the checkpoints, merchants from other parts of Whirlpool, dozens of people and carts, just on the first part of the bridge, and he could see many more farther along. But what was really the most imposing part of the scenery was without a doubt the city itself. For Shiro Uzumaki was far more than a mere fortress. Standing on a gigantic rectangular plateau, the ancestral home of the Uzumaki looked like a king sitting on his throne. The city's walls were easily 150 feet tall, maybe more, fortified towers rising at regular intervals along its walls, and towering above it all, was Shiro Uzumaki itself, a traditional castle with 8 successive roofs, 12 fortified towers on its walls. Naruto could only stay there and stare at the vision of majesty before him, overwhelmed by the sheer size of it. How could such a fortress have ever fallen? How could measly humans ever hope to take down a construction of such size? It sounded so impossible. However, looking at the mountainside, Naruto could see places that, even after so many years, showed the mark of Doden techniques being used, no doubt to create stone projectiles to batter the massive ramparts. It was here that his clan had made its last stand, in this fortress that so many Uzumaki had perished. It was humbling. Naruto shivered. He could feel the mark of a chakra far more potent than any human one being used here, even after so many years. Several Biju had been unleashed against the walls. The simple fact that they still stood was proof of their quality. Breathing deeply, he began to walk forward, his action seemingly breaking the rest of the group from their awe-induced trance. Naruto stole a look at his mother, and saw her struggling to contain her tears, looking at the walls in disbelief. "Mom," he asked softly, it looks almost like nothing ever happened. When I came after Uzu fell, gods." The south wall was laying in the valley, ripped clean off its foundations. The west wall was breached in 5 different places, the north wall was half crumbled and the east wall had collapsed inward. Half of the Shiro had been blown off, the town had burned, and now it looks all so new. Naruto shivered. He couldn't even imagine seeing this glorious fortress destroyed, seeing it in such a state after witnessing its glory. It must have been mind-crushing. The very kind of vision that could destroy the determination of anyone. Yes, it was terrible, agreed Masahiro. A truly frightening sight. I think the worst thing in all that was that I was trapped with civilians in one of the shelters and was forced to see my home fall. Soburo-sama certainly didn't go down without a fight though. He summoned the Manin no Shiro and killed both the Rokubi and the Nibi before being forced to send it away. It took a squad of 50 elite Jonin from all the allied villages and both the Mizukage and Reikage to take him down. Naruto nodded solemnly. Uzumaki Soburo, his grandfather, Soburo the Unbroken, last daimyo of Whirlpool, one of the very few individuals in the history of the elemental nations to have reached the status of SS rank ninja, along with Uchiha Madara, Senju Hashirama and Hanzo the Salamander to only name a few. Even his own father, the renowned Yellow Flash had failed to reach this category, though, in his defense, he was quite damn close and would have reached it effortlessly in a few short years. Refocusing on the road ahead, Naruto saw the people recognize him, freeing the way and bowing to him and his escort. Most of them were simple farmers. There were some carts of ores coming from the mountains, and some goods that apparently came from the ports. As they walked through the crowd, Naruto listened to what the little folks said, and was quite surprised. "Is that our new daimyo? He looks so young. That woman, is she an Uzumaki too? By the gods, 2 Uzumaki have come back to us. This is truly the mark that Whirlpool will arise again. Look at these girls. They have fox ears and tails. Are they kitsune? The Hyuga have 2 kitsune in their ranks. Inari-sama must have blessed the clan. I heard the Bakeneko clan returned. The young lord is already rebuilding the might of Whirlpool. Welcome home, my lord," one of the people shouted, causing some people to go wide-eyed at this audacity. Naruto turned to the one that had so boldly spoken, and saw a young man, probably in his 20s, sturdy-looking. "What is your name?" asked Naruto with a smile. Emboldened by the positive answer, the young man grinned widely. "Tetsuo Nogamashi, proud miner of Whirlpool. Well, I thank you for this warm welcome, Tetsuo-san. But you might want to learn a bit more about protocol," answered Naruto amusedly, causing the young man to rub his neck in embarrassment, and an older man nearby to palm his face. Naruto resumed walking as the crowd began laughing, and chuckled lightly when he heard Tetsuo mumble something about ninja maturing way faster. First approach of Whirlpool, success. Sanjutsu Tomoka, Sha Taigashira of the White Lotus Yakuza, barked a few more orders to the group placed under his orders. Quickly, his men created a corridor through which the young lord and his group could walk in peace. The inhabitants simply asked for what they were making way this time, and made way, some even spontaneously helping in forming the corridor when they learned who would pass through. Tomoka signaled one of the Kyodai under his command to come over. Yes sir. Gonshu, did you finally catch that rapist? Yes sir. He was disposed of. We have also dissuaded the thieves and pickpockets to act today. Good, the city needs to be perfect for the young lord. How far along are the preparations for tonight's festival? Our contact got us all the fireworks Shosu-sama wanted. We have also enough sake and food. The lanterns will be hung at 4 p.m. I also took the liberty to have a gift basket prepared for Uzumaki-sama with specialties from all around the island. Excellent. I'll mention this to Shosu-sama. It will accompany nicely the gift basket of fruits he had prepared for the young lord. Now go, and try to get me a confirmation about the return of the Yubokuman and Bakeneko. If they are back, try to get a delegation of each clan to show up if you can. The man saluted and left to perform his assigned task, and Tomoka resumed watching over the preparations while meditating about his situation in life. He was the Shataigashira, the second lieutenant of Whirlpool's Yakuza, a good position, but a dangerous one. The White Lotus had earned the enmity of many powers in this region of the world. After the fall of Whirlpool, the remains of the fleet weren't the only ones to go rogue and try to get a pound of flesh from those that had hurt their home. The White Lotus had gone completely underground, ferrying supplies to Whirlpool's pirates, undermining several minor villages that participated in the assault, and attacking the countries themselves through economical means. When the Uzumaki had first arrived on Whirlpool, nearly 3 centuries ago, they had crushed all the factions that fought for control of the island, unifying it under their control. To better control the island, they had decided that they needed a way to control criminality. Uzumaki Nobara, head of the time, had ordered the leaders of all the Yakuza families to gather before him, before ordering them to become one family or face destruction. Of course, the various leaders had widely different opinions on who should lead the family, but in the end the Tamahawa had taken leadership. Since then, the White Lotus had control over the darker aspects of Whirlpool's economy, with the blessing of the Uzumaki clan. They ensured that drugs weren't too widespread, that contraband went only through them, that no one committed murders or rapes, and disposed discreetly of those that did. Like on the territory of every ninja clan worth their salt, a crime was something that only few people were allowed to do, and those people were the White Lotus. All they could hope was that the young lord wasn't an idealistic idiot like the shinobi system somehow managed to produce sometimes. However, his musings were interrupted by one of his men rushing to him. Sir, the young lord is almost there. A- and Kushina-sama is with him. What? Kushina-sama is alive? Yes sir, I saw her with my very eyes. Excellent, spread the word. Whirlpool's Avenger is back and well. Quickly, the man darted in the crowd and did his job, bringing the already excited crowd to a boiling point. While some were resentful that Uzumaki Kushina hadn't tried to rebuild Whirlpool, there were others that heard of her vengeful killing spree that had culminated in the destruction of the village hidden in frost. When the Uzumaki and their escort stepped through the gates, the people waiting for them exploded into a deafening cheer. Tomoka pressed a hand to his ear, flinching at the abrupt noise. He never did like violent sounds. Straightening up, he signaled a few of his men to come with him as he quietly took his place in front of the group. It was mostly symbolic, a way to show he was willing to take any attack that had come from the front for his lord, but it also served the purpose of seeing if the young lord was open to reasoning. Thankfully, he said nothing, making Tomoka smile softly. That was a very good start. It took them about 10 minutes to reach the gates of the castle, where a group of samurai was waiting, the champions of the Hentai clans at the front. Quietly, Tomoka and his men stepped aside, letting the young lord pass and enter his domain. As Tomoka turned to walk away, he heard none other than the old sword call him. Tomoka-san, wait a minute, called Masahiro, making the Yakuza turn and bow politely. Of course Masahiro-sama, how may I assist you? Unless you know how to fight off old age, you can't help me, said the old samurai with a small smirk. However, you can help Uzumaki-sama. Give this to your master. An envelope was given to Tomoka, the wax seal of Whirlpool ensuring it would remain closed. With another bow, Tomoka accepted the letter. Uzumaki-sama's will shall be carried out, answered Tomoka formally, and I'll ask our medics if they know any herbal remedies that could help you, he added with a polite smile. Masahiro nodded and entered the stronghold. Tomoka quickly made his way to the White Lotus headquarters in the city, where he knew Shosu-sama would have arrived by now, the envelope safely tucked in his kimono. Quickly, he entered the tea house and made his way to the basement, the staff letting him pass without trouble. There, he found his Oyabun sitting behind a desk that was usually Tomoka's, a serious expression on his face. Ah, Tomoka, report, Shosu-sama, everything is going swimmingly. The fireworks, food and drinks are plenty, the rapist was killed, and the thieves were dissuaded from acting. Uzumaki-sama's reaction was quiet acceptance of our presence, and Masahiro-sama gave me a letter for you to read. Tomoka took the letter out of his kimono, ensuring with a glance that it wasn't crinkled. Before bowing, taking 3 steps, and extending his arms, his upper body still parallel with the floor. Shosu quickly took the envelope and opened it, reading through the lines quickly while his subordinate straightened up. When he saw the smile on the Obian's face, Tomoka knew that his first impression was right. The young lord was wise indeed. Warn Tonka, we're invited to see the young lord in a week, said Shosu, satisfaction openly present in his voice. Tomoka smiled and bowed before leaving the room to send a message to the first lieutenant. With a weary sigh, Naruto put on his bathrobe. After all this walking, he wanted a soak, and thankfully, the Shiro had a private onsen. It was completely artificial, but it was there, and that was all Naruto cared about right now. With a contented smile, he opened the door, and felt his jaw drop. Why? Because there just so happened to be 2 girls he knew very well sitting in the onsen, making no efforts to hide their nudity. Hanabi was eating banana pudding and giving him sultry looks. Hinata was munching on a cinnamon bun while giving him a shy but alluring smile, both of them putting their impressively developed bodies on full display for him to enjoy. Those naughty vixens. Kushina breathed deeply, taking the air in, holding it for a few seconds, then letting it go, pushing her stray thoughts out with the air. Meditating was an extremely difficult exercise to learn for women. No one really bothered to explain it, women just tended to think a lot and constantly, which was why multitasking was easier for them. However, when it came to emptying their minds and turning it blank, the men certainly had the advantage. She smiled amusedly at this thought. Men had the advantage at reaching the thought level of a rock, how amusing. With yet another breath, she expelled the little mirthful thought, and finally reached her inner peace, away from all the thoughts, the troubles, the world. Peace. Then, she allowed tightly controlled strands of thoughts to enter her mind, allowing her to review them with extreme precision. She was uncomfortable. The last time she had been there, the castle was in ruins, the survivors of the attack roaming the ruins, looking for lives to save, personal effects to salvage, or for the least scrupulous, wealth to take for themselves. It had been painful. She had a few early memories of the city, and the contrast with the charred ruins had been daunting. She remembered the last festival she had attended at the Shiro. It was a warm spring, the sakura trees were blossoming, their sweet scent permeating the air. She remembered that Mama and Papa had taken her and Kuroni to the games. She had won a stuffed turtle in one of the throw games. Koburo Gigi had been there too, sneaking her a few glasses of lemonades, winking to her and telling her it was a drink for big girls like it was forbidden. She had trouble imagining her kind and warm father as the war machine that had trumped 2Cage, but he was Soburo the Unbroken. It was just a side of him she had never seen. With another breath, she cleared her thoughts again. She had to expunge these feelings, to allow herself to heal. Both physically and mentally. At least, the physical part was coming along nicely. Now that they had the nutrients to rebuild themselves, the cells created from Kyuubi's chakra alone were stabilizing themselves and the energy was slowly filtering out of her. Mentally, she was still a wreck. Even after nearly 2 weeks, the idea that she spent 12, almost 13 years of her life in a coma was horrifying. She didn't have Minato to help her through it. Naruto was basically a grown-up man in a child's body. Makoto was dead, Whirlpool was being rebuilt. So much was happening, she was so lost. But she was a kunoichi, her mind and heart were strong. She would deal with it the way she had every such problem in her life, through careful introspection, meditation, and determination. For now, she would need to prepare a little excursion to the ruins of Uzushio. It was long overdue. There were quite a lot of Uzumaki artifacts that were lost during the fall, and they simply couldn't have been looted because they'd have been used by now. The Fuin Bunshin scrolls were a prime example of this, and so was the living seal summoning contract. Another of the old Uzumaki relics to have disappeared was the honor of Aisawa, one of the few relics of the legendary Hantai Empire, a Nagamaki that could channel ninjutsu, and even fuinjutsu, through its blade. A weapon of such power would have been used by any intelligent village long ago. Kushina frowned slightly. Something was amiss. None of the surviving attacking villages had shown any benefits from raiding Uzushiogaku, not even a slight increase in competence in fuinjutsu, no new weapons, nothing. How could it be? What were the odds that they wouldn't loot the village, the country, they had so painstakingly conquered? The only remaining solution would be that the knowledge of Uzu, its wealth, its artifacts, had been hidden somewhere that was hidden on the island. But how? Iwa could have used Doden Jutsu to detect everything in the earth. Even Uzushio didn't have enough power to hide anything in the airs, and water would have destroyed the precious knowledge her clan would have wanted preserved. Where could they have possibly hidden their most precious treasures? Her frown deepening, Kushina searched in her memories, trying to find a clue, when something insignificant, but shocking for the little girl she was, came back to her mind. Little Kushina was walking down the street, a delighted smile on her face, holding Mama's hand. Everything was good today. Papa had come back safe from his mission, and Mama had bought her ice cream. However, Her happy world was ripped apart when a group of shouting men charged down the street, coming from the Tower of Uzu, screaming at people to clear the path. Kushina was no stranger to blood and wounds. She lived in a shinobi village after all, but the wounds on the man they were leading to the hospital were like nothing she had ever seen. Through the blood, she managed to see the wounds. It looked like 3 successive sets of jaws had bitten into the shoulder, as if 3 creatures of different sizes had bitten him, or as if a single creature with 3 jaws had done so. No creature on this planet did that. Kushina's eyes flew open. They were coming from the Tower of Uzu. That was the key. The clan had hidden Uzushio's treasures and knowledge in another dimension, one apparently filled with aggressive creatures. Jumping to her feet, Kushina left her room, walking at a brisk pace. Quickly, she made her way to Masahiro's office, knocked once, and opened the door. The old samurai looked at her, visibly surprised. "Lady Kushina, I need you to lend me a group of your best men, if possible with some knowledge of fuinjutsu and or techniques fit to remove rubble. I have an idea on where to find the knowledge of Uzushio." The old man's eyes widened and he immediately went to his file cabinet. "Very well, I will perform a pre-selection according to those standards. Come back in the evening and I should have the files ready. You'll be able to leave as soon as tomorrow." Kushina nodded in thanks and left the office, closing the door behind her. Then, she made her way to her son's room. She needed to talk to Naruto. He was there to train, and train he would. She would give him a training regimen the likes of which he had never seen, of that she was sure. However, to her dismay, she did not find him in his room, only a servant girl that was busy cleaning the room one last time before Naruto settled in it. The young woman diligently informed Kushina that her son was in the hot springs, relaxing from the trip. The redhead thanked the girl and quickly made her way to the hot springs, but when she finally arrived and opened the door, she got a bad surprise. "Naruto, would you please explain this?" calmly requested Kushina as she looked at her son, seating in the hot springs, one fox Hyuga on each side of him, lips slightly bruised and a collection of hickeys on his neck. The 3 pre-teens were looking at her like deers in the headlights. Well, you see mom, the thing is, Oh, I see very well, young man." She ground out. "It seems self-control exercises will have to be added to the program. Now, you two, get out of this onsen and back into your rooms." She barked, leaving no room for discussion and causing the twins to quickly leave the area after covering themselves with their towels, blushing brightly. Naruto's mood visibly dropped. "Anyway," grumpily continued Kushina, "I'll be absent for some time. I need to see something at the ruins of Uzushiogakure, and it could turn the area dangerous. You'll be staying here and following a training regimen I'm going to write for you. And it's going to be unlike anything you've done before. I can take it," calmly stated Naruto, confidence radiating off of him. "Let me guess, you've almost never been tired after training, correct?" Naruto nodded. "Well, the training regimen I'm going to give you was designed by an Uzumaki, for an Uzumaki." She said, a smirk on her lips. She was satisfied to see Naruto's confidence drop visibly. Good, it wouldn't do for her son to get too cocky. Without saying anything else, Kushina returned to her quarters and began to outline the training regimen and list what she'd need. Thankfully, she hadn't unpacked yet, so it was one less thing to do. The next morning, Naruto woke up early, as usual, and made his way out of his room to eat breakfast. He was still unfamiliar with the lavish corridors of the palace, but as all shinobi, he was able to quickly map out unknown regions, so he could easily manage. He was quite happy with the party last night. He had managed to give yet another good impression to the people of Whirlpool, and he had to admit those Yakuza knew how to plan a party. At the breakfast table, the twins quickly joined him and asked him what her mother had wanted to talk about with him. After a quick explanation, they informed him that they would begin their training soon too. While about halfway done with his breakfast, Masahiro entered the room and walked to him before bowing respectfully. "My lord, Lady Kushina left this for you before she left early this morning." The old samurai produced a scroll. "She also insisted that you start as soon as possible." Naruto took the scroll and opened it, before blanching. There was more or less normal in the number of exercises, and nowhere near Guy's level of madness, but he had to perform the exercises in a precise time frame. Why? Because, as Kushina explained in the scroll, fuinjutsu was the clan's signature weapon, and while they couldn't have physical skills lagging behind, they needed to keep the seal time intact. So, the physical exercising was compressed in time, not in intensity. Oh boy. Kushina landed heavily on the ground, slightly cratering it. It was to be expected with the speed at which she was traveling and the added weight of her samurai-styled armor. She heard her forces landing behind her in a loose formation so as to avoid injuries from the gravel that may rise up from the numerous impacts. She looked at the remains of Uzushio, and felt once again this odd mix of sadness and anger, much like the first time she had seen them, only less intense. All right, this is a recovery mission. See what you can gather from the old Bakeneko and Yubokuman clan homes, secure a perimeter, and don't go too far from my clones, they'll locate and disarm the seal traps. We will deploy in squads of 2, 1 samurai and 1 shinobi, with one of my clones to support each group. If the clone is destroyed, retreat to the central plaza and await instructions. Command squad, with me. With a hand sign, she created 50 clones and let the 100 men Masahiro gave her team up and spread out while her own team of 4 experts, 1 shinobi and 3 samurai, followed her to the Uzu Tower. Before long, they were standing in front of the entrance, the seal barrier that blocked the tower still standing. Wow, it's still activated after all this time, marveled the shinobi, a young adult by the name of Kuronami Tomo. That's Uzumaki Fuinjutsu for you Tomo, answered Kushina as she tried to decipher the kanji blocking the way. Ah, interesting. It's an 8-point barrier with a 4-point absorption seal included. The chakra capacitors and the convectors are linked in an interesting way. I think it's Kura-san's work. She was Uzushio's topmost expert in barriers before the fall. Let's see, it is designed to let air come in, but nothing else while letting the defenders throw weapons and techniques through unhindered. I think I know how they died. It could stop fireballs and absorb them to reinforce the barrier, but it couldn't stop airborne poison. Kushina kept looking at the barrier for a few minutes before placing her fingers on 2 apparently random kanji and sending chakra through her fingertips, bringing the barrier down. Incredible, murmured a samurai, Kaiu Hozo. Kushina simply shrugged before walking in. Inside were remains of about 100 Uzushio shinobi, 8 of them wearing Uzumaki clan robes and armor. From the positions of the bodies, it was obvious they had suffered greatly before their death. With a heavy heart, Kushina spawned more clones to identify the bodies and give them a proper burial. Once her clones set out to work, she made her way to the office of the village leader, hoping to find some answers on where the artifacts of Uzu had been sent. Climbing the stairs, she could see more bodies in the corridors of the tower, and determined that about 400 Uzu shinobi had made their last stand in the tower before dying painfully to a poisonous gas. In a way, it was a morbid compliment that Kiri and Kumo had been forced to resort to such underhanded tactics. As she arrived in the village head's office, she saw the remains of Bakeneko Homura, head ninja of Uzu at its fall, and his partner Tanro, a once mighty Black Panther. As she stepped into the office, she saw that the panther's skeleton missed a leg and that all the ribs on one side were cut, and that Homura's remains also showed a great deal of trauma, and Kushina suspected that they were both already dead when they were placed in the office. Looking around the office, she tried to locate anything that may clue her in. Her eyes narrowed when she saw a seemingly perfectly preserved painting of Uzumaki Toshiro, the founder of Uzushiogakure. Looking carefully around for any seal trap, she made her way to the painting before looking it over more closely. Slowly, she reached forward, placing her palm against the painting, and frowning at how ethereal it looked. Sealing lines suddenly appeared, glowing slightly, before fading away with the painting. Kushina let a breath out. She should have expected that. Looking inside the revealed cavity, she pulled out the scroll inside and carefully unrolled it. It wasn't very long, but what it contained was what she was searching. If you read this, then you are a descendant of one of our ninja clans. One of our own. I hope you are one of us, Bakeneko, or that at least some of our clan survived. If not, please remember us. I am Bakeneko Homura, and those are my final lines. Soon, I will pass away. I have already felt Tanro pass over to the other side. I will join him soon, but I must first do my duty. Let me tell you this, comrade, they may take our lives, but they will not take our power. Soburo-sama has ordered us to hide all of our greatest treasures and mightiest weapons in our dimensional outpost. The barrier down there will hold for a long time, maybe it was still standing when you arrived at the building. If so, welcome Uzumaki-san. Anyway, the way to the outpost is in the basement, it is at the lowest level, in the circular room at the end of the corridor. But comrade, heed my warning, do not go there without heavy preparation and one of the armor suits there, it is crucial that you take one of those. This dimension is beyond hostile, Konoha's Forest of Death looks like a finely cut yard compared to this place. The creatures there are monstrous, and even those that are not carnivorous are aggressive and vicious. If that wasn't enough, the whole place is saturated with natural energy. I have seen men mutated into monsters in a matter of minutes after a minor breach in the experimental containment armors. Even the Uzumaki aren't safe there, and they have an insane tolerance to natural energy. Had that dimension been safer, we'd have hidden the civilians there, but it shall not be. I feel my strength fading. I do not have long left. Tanro is calling me, I must join him. I hear screams of pain from below, I think they used poisonous gas. My last men stood so valiantly, I have failed them in dying last. Hear me out, unknown comrade, Lady Kushina awaits in the leaf, her line will shake this world. Her line will give Whirlpool a new life, I am sure of it. If you wish to see Whirlpool rise anew, seek her out, or seek out her progeny. Lady Kushina, if by chance you are the one reading this, may the gods bless your soul, and any child you have. Our hopes lie in your hands. Kushina nodded to herself and pocketed the scroll. She took a long look at Homura, before smiling. I am here, Homura-sama, and my boy is bringing Whirlpool back up. She said softly, you did not die in vain, and we made those bastards pay dearly for this attack. You have been avenged. Without another word, she turned and climbed down the stairs, her squad behind her. As she made her way down the stairs, she noticed that a few groups were working on sorting out and identifying the corpses, and nodded in thank to them before refocusing on her task. Quickly making her way to the stairs leading to the underground vaults, she sent a group of 10 clones into the stairway to locate and disarm the traps while she helped with the bodies. After an hour, the group dispelled, informing her that their task was done, prompting her to wave one of her subordinates over. You're in charge. Send some groups in the basement to gather the old archives, it can help with identifying the bodies. The samurai saluted and began to bark out orders. Kushina waved over her command squad and began to walk into the bowels of Uzushio, passing the various levels of the basement. First, they walked past the archives, then the almost empty armory, the emergency supplies warehouse, the emergency hospital, and lastly, they arrived at a large steel door covered in seals. Kushina, without hesitating, began to send chakra in apparently random seals in quick succession, causing a clicking sound to be heard, and the door to open. Kushina stepped into the dark room just before seals hummed to life, spreading a soft glow throughout the large, circular room. On the ground was a large seal bearing similarities to the summoning seal. In the back of the room, another doorway led to a smaller room filled with armors, probably chakra sealed so as to avoid nature energy overload. Stepping into the small room, Kushina saw that a small shelf held scrolls with a specific pattern. Quickly, she gathered them and turned to leave. We're going back. What? But Kushina-sama, we didn't do anything, exclaimed the second samurai, Keizono Toshiro. These scrolls may hold information. Are you really going to jump into another dimension with no preparation? Flatly asked Kushina. The man had the decency to look embarrassed. Kushina turned back and started to head for the stairs. She settled in the hospital, using the head physician's office room. Quickly, she made a clone that cleared the desk and dispelled before Kushina dumped all the scrolls on it. Opening the first one, she began to read about the dangerous and wild dimension where the Uzumaki had hidden their greatest treasures and weapons. Naruto looked at the training regimen and swallowed thickly. This was beyond insane. He was supposed to cram into 3 hours 600 push-ups, squats, sit-ups and pull-ups, 100 laps around the training ground, and 100 more, upside down. Maybe that was why there was a roof around the border of the training field. And until you reached that, you weren't even considered beginner level. That settled it. His clan mates were sadistic. With a deep breath, he activated the alarm clock, and dropped on his arms. Hinata and Hanabi were standing in front of their father, relaxed. They would learn the basics of famous Juken techniques and find ways to reproduce them, starting with the 64 palms of Hatake and the vacuum palm. Possibly the Kaden if they progressed enough. It might be hard to explain, but they'd find a way. The Hyuga fighting style was known enough that reverse engineering was plausible, especially for a Byakugan wielder. Very well, said Hiashi calmly. We shall begin. Surely, you are aware that many a Hyuga technique have 8 trigrams at the beginning of their names, and that on many occasions people surviving Hyuga techniques reported seeing a traditional Hake divination circle. Both young girls nodded. Those are no coincidence. While the appearance of the circle if assumed to be a consequence of the technique, it is wrong. It is the circle that allows the technique. Hiashi chuckled at their gobsmacked faces. What Naruto-san will son realize? Continued Hiashi. Is that I didn't chose to support him only because he could help to bring you two back home. We are to the Uzumaki what the Uchiha are to the Senju. But, contrarily to them, we hold no hatred for our sister clan. What the Uchiha and Senju forgot, we remember, though very few of us actually do. I am one of the few, but only because I explored the archives of our clan after your abduction in my quest for a solution. What I learned was staggering. He solemnly said, in the most ancient part of the archives, I learned the truth of both our origins and that of the Senju and Uchiha. All 4 of our clans are descended from Otsutsuki Kagaya, the rabbit goddess and demon, first ruler of the unified world. This woman lost her humanity to acquire chakra, an energy she then passed on to her children, Otsutsuki Hagoromo and Hamura. After they battled their maddened mother to save mankind from extinction, they destroyed the legendary Hantai Empire, freeing its people from the unjust caste system that ruled back then. Afterward, they settled down themselves, and had children. Otsutsuki Hagoromo became later known as the Sage of Six Path, for he walked 6 great paths in life to reach illumination. His sons Indra, to whom he gave his eyes, and Ashura, to whom he gave his body, founded the Uchiha and Senju clans respectively, and a feud started between them when Ashura was chosen to rule. Meanwhile, our ancestor Hamura settled down in a monastic and meditative life. He had children too. Like his brother, he gave the eldest his eyes, and the youngest his body. The eldest was Otsutsuki Kimiko, first matriarch of the Hyuga clan, and revered ancestor. The youngest was Otsutsuki Kobun, named after the ship he was born on, and first patriarch of the Uzumaki clan. Their father trained them well in the arts of both the body and mind, but their tastes differed. While Kimiko preferred hand-to-hand combat and relished divination and meditation, Kobun was wilder, fiercer, at his best when wielding his sword or his spear, but at the same time had a fascination for ofudas. Kimiko created her own taijutsu style, the Juken, with much of our techniques coming straight from her, while Kobun single-handedly created fuinjutsu. While Indra and Ashura battled, Kimiko and Kobun trained, and soon followers flocked to their sides, searching from a safe haven, away from the battling siblings. When the war between Ashura and Indra reached their doorstep, the children of Hamura faced them together, and drove them away in a fight that separated what is now water country from the continent and raised mountains. I am not sure who won the fight, only that Indra and Ashura's conflict ceased, and that they parted ways, only to have their feud survive through their followers and descendants. After time, Kimiko and Kobun separated, their parting words being of fondness when the youngest left to travel the world. When their legacies met again, 5 centuries later, the now named Uzumaki clan gifted the Hyuga with our greatest weapon, the 8 trigram seal. This seal allows us to strike and react faster and mold chakra better. This seal became the base of all of our strongest and most advanced techniques. Only the strongest Hyuga can execute our most prized techniques without this seal. He looked at them in the eyes, giving them a moment to take in his words. This is the part that we must work on first.